Boy, read it.
That's my line. Boy, read it. When I was born, video games were just starting, and I played them from very near to the beginning of their existence. My first game was Pong. Playing Atari, going to the arcade, getting a Commodore 64, a Nintendo, and so on, was all a part of my childhood. Through it all, I've seen video games evolve more rapidly than any other medium, and I think that's because the technology upon which they're based is conducive to that rapid evolution. When I was young, they were widely considered to be toys for kids, but as we got older, we never stopped playing them, and now they're gaining respect as a legitimate artistic medium. Make no mistake, video games are art. If you don't think they are, then tell me what other thing requires so many artists to create, yet is still not considered art. A major difference between video games and other artistic mediums is agency. You did not have a say in what was depicted in that painting in a museum, only your interpretation of it. You did not get to choose what a character in a movie did. Video games involve you in the art and give you choice, and that means people will put more weight on their influence. When a guy in a movie murders a bunch of people, you are wholly removed from that situation and are merely an observer. But when you are the one murdering a bunch of people in a video game, some believe that warrants more concern. The evidence stands apart from that concern. Study after study shows that video games do not cause people to be more violent. In fact, as video games have exploded in popularity, violent crime has actually reduced. Similarly, just as pornography has become freely accessible, rape has reduced. Of course, correlation doesn't imply causation, but what is clear is that as these mediums and genres that typically puritanical and traditional conservatives have warned us about have become ever more popular, their alleged negative effects have not only failed to materialize, but the exact opposite happened. Now, detractors point to increased aggression, failing to realize that increased aggression follows all forms of stress and competition, and that this aggression might be a necessary outlet, once poured out upon the living, but now relegated to the digital. It would not surprise me at all if video games and porn actually did help reduce rape and other violent crimes by providing people with an outlet that has no consequence because all their victims are digital and artificial. This leads to a sort of curious phenomenon that I've noticed, one in which sex is seen as a bigger taboo than violence. This has been the nature of many cultures for thousands of years. From the Bible to video games, graphic violence is more easily accepted than graphic sex, which is counterintuitive. Why is love and lust more taboo than hate and violence? Nudity and sex in a video game or movie will guarantee a mature rating, but not necessarily violence. Why is this? I think I inadvertently learned the reason why back during the late 90s. You see, I did not start playing first-person video games until the genre had already been around for a few years. I had missed the original Wolfenstein and Doom. The very first-person video game I ever played was Turok on the Nintendo 64. I was immediately enthralled by the perspective. No longer was I a god looking at everything from a distance, but I was there, mixed up in the action. When someone was attacking, They were attacking me, and not just some 8-bit sprite. The first thing I did in that video game was run straight at another human being as he ran toward me, obviously hostile. I pushed the button and out came my arm, slashing the other man's throat with a knife. Blood spurted from his neck and he fell to the ground, gasping. Awesome, I thought. I immediately loved it. Yet, am I the type of person who would want to run up to a stranger and slash their throat? No. If I did that, it would horrify me and haunt me for the rest of my life. Yet I had fun doing it countless times in Turok. I also killed countless other human beings in countless other video games. I am digital genocide. So, a curious thing happened with what ended up being my favorite video game of all time. The year was 1998. And at that time, if you wanted to buy a video game for your computer, you went to electronics boutique in the mall and perused the walls lined with video game CDs packaged in what looked like cereal boxes. You looked at the pictures on the boxes, read what it was about, and if it seemed cool, you gambled your money to try it. Amongst all these cereal boxes, there was a unique trapezoidal box that housed a video game called Thief, The Dark Project, by the wonderful Looking Glass Studios and published by Eidos. I passed up that video game countless times. I refused to buy it. It was a game about stealing, and stealing is wrong. Stealing is immoral. I felt sort of appalled that they'd make a video game about stealing. So, I didn't buy it, and it sat there on the shelf as I gambled my money on other video games wherein I'm butchering people by the thousands. Isn't that funny? There existed in my mind a very clear inconsistency, but it was only clear in hindsight. One day, during what seemed like a particularly long video game drought, I was looking at the box for Half-Life, fondly remembering my time in that game. It was such an amazing game. It had an unpredictable roller coaster ride of a story that took me to all kinds of diverse, interesting, unexpected places. I killed a lot of people in that game. Just as I was realizing how many digital lives I took in that game, I looked back at Thief with new eyes. Thief looked cool. I always liked medieval settings, and Thief seemed to have it. If I was okay with killing in video games, then why wasn't I okay with stealing in them? Actually, hadn't I already stolen in video games before? How many places had I ransacked for loot? Didn't that loot once belong to somebody? Isn't that why it was called loot in the first place? Slowly but surely, I convinced myself to buy Thief. The reward I received for convincing myself was massive, as that game provided so much entertainment in the years to come, throughout countless playthroughs, even 20 years later. The real irony was that Thief was a game that challenged me to get all the way through it without killing a single person. There are times when killing people in Thief would make the game easier, yet the challenge of the game compels you to do it without taking life. Even though you're a thief and you start out seeking personal gain, you end up using your skills as a thief to save the world, toppling a trickster god, which upsets a delicate balance maintained by a clandestine organization called the Keepers, and inadvertently empowers opposing religious fanatics with whom you must contend in Thief 2, The Metal Age, its amazing sequel. Your character was a vulnerable, reluctant anti-hero, far from a Superman, in a dangerous world where you take few, if any, lives, and end up saving those who oppose you. Thief, a game I once refused to buy because it seemed immoral, turned out to be the most moral of all my games, and the most fun. Because I did not have a puritanical view of sex, as I was not religious, my original moral objection manifested in the stealing aspect. So why was it that stealing in games turned me away, but not killing? I think it's for the same reason that sex in games is seen as more taboo than killing. Which are you more likely to do in real life? Are you more likely to have sex in real life, to steal in real life, or to kill in real life? Now, most of us have sex, and most of us have probably taken something that doesn't belong to us, but how many of us have killed another human being? The more a game asks you to do something that is rooted in your day-to-day reality, the more likely we are to recognize some sort of taboo. We are human, though, and we do these things. Human beings create art, and if art is to be meaningful, it needs to address the things that concern us. What we should ask ourselves is not merely whether sex or violence is occurring in the art, but what is the broader context in which it is occurring, and what is the art telling us about how and why it's occurring. In the end, we also have to recognize the difference between a simulation and the real thing. To what degree are we being affected by the simulation, and is that effect actually a good thing? I, for one, believe that it is. We recognize it isn't real, and yet it still satiates a primal part of our human nature. How many times has a repressed individual exuberantly taken a public stance against some perceived depravity, only to later be exposed for hiding a secret life of indulgence in that exact same depravity? The lady doth protest too much, methinks. Long ago, a mind keen on military strategy might have found solace in a game of chess. Feeling satisfaction in passing such a test with one military mind pitted against another need not come to bloodshed on a battlefield.
Boy, read it.
Boy, read it. Boy, read it. Boy, read it. Go.
Speaking of video games, an old friend of mine who I've known since the early 1990s when we were both still in high school, recently started a YouTube channel regarding video games, technology, and pop culture. He's good at everything I've seen him try to be good at, and it looks like YouTube will be no different. His first major video is an extensive review of the new Spider-Man game for the PlayStation 4. Judging by that video, and that he'll only get better from there, I think he's worth subscribing to, and I would be really proud to help him get a foothold in such a competitive marketplace. So please check him out, and I'll be sure to see what you have to say in his comments section, as well as my own. Thank you, and take care, everybody.